Hey guys, Alex from 7th Hour Films back again with Yu-Gi-Oh! Last time around, we looked at the first 20 chapters of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which were basically the Slice of Life school chapters, as well as the Shadow Games Trial of the Mind chapters. Where basically, Yugi solved the Millennium Puzzle, did some Shadow Game stuff, met up with Shoddy, and then was tested by Shoddy. Until he eventually won Shoddy's test, and that leads us into where we are today. Today, I'm going to be taking a look at chapters 21 through 40 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, the Death Tea arc, which is pretty interesting. As you can see, I now have some of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Things. I have my my dual disc, one of them, by the way, and I also have one of my decks with me, because this set of chapters is all about Seto Kaiba, and how he wants to take revenge on Yugi. So yeah, I thought that this stuff would be appropriate. So yeah, let's go ahead and hop right into Chapter 21, Digital Pet Duel. This actually technically is not part of the Death Tea arc. That'll start in a couple chapters. But yeah, Digital Pet Duel, where basically it starts out with everyone at Domino High has basically a Tamagotchi, and they're taking care of it, and Yugi's like, they're all the rage, and it's like, okay. And so some of the notes I took on this one, there was a point where someone said, oh, I didn't clean the poop of my digital pet, and it died. Like, well, geez, I mean, I guess unsanitary conditions, but I thought that was a little weird. But yeah, this whole chapter was kind of weird. So yeah, everyone has a digital pet, even Jonochi. I think the only person who doesn't is Honda. So yeah, I think because he says like he has a real pet at home. So, which I get that. I have a real pet who's probably trying to go to sleep, even though he doesn't want to right now. But yeah, so I get that. We have our bad guy, Kujirada. I made a note that he kind of looks like Ed, like with the no chin and stuff like that. And apparently he has a digital pet with an elongated life. So normally, like, they don't live past like a day or two, but his did. And also his just suddenly decides to be a cannibal, and like he talks to Kujirada and is like, oh, I'm going to eat other pets. And then Yugi's, who he names U2, actually gets into a fight with Kujirada's pet, and he actually becomes Dark U2, like the Yami version, like Dark Yugi, and then he wins. Technically, there is no Dark Yugi in this chapter, so yeah, he just becomes Dark U2, and then he wins. And that's that. Kind of weird, but overall, fun little chapter. Chapter 22 is called The American Hero Part 1. American Hero! Anyway. So, American comics are all the rage, at least for Hanasaki, and his favorite one is Zombire. And he actually invites Yugi and the gang over to look at all of his figures that his dad gets when he goes to America. And it's all nice and cool. And his dad actually got him a Zombire costume. And then, let's see. So Hanasaki puts on the costume and goes out as Zombire, like he's a hero on patrol in MHA or something. And then he finds some guys beating up a guy, and then he beats them up. But it turns out the dad paid them to fake getting beaten up, to boost Hanasaki's confidence. This leads us into Chapter 23, which is American Hero Part 2. And so there's a whole complicated like ransom thing that goes on, because these guys that the dad paid, they basically want to extort him for money now. And so originally it looks like they ransom... Well, okay, so they tell Hanasaki that they have a ransom for Yugi, and then that draws in Hanasaki, but then they say they have a ransom for Hanasaki. I don't know why they couldn't have just kidnapped him. I don't know. It seemed like the whole ransom thing was very complicated, but then the real hero shows up, because Dark Yugi is here, and he draws out this whole maze of fire, and he just burns it. Yeah. And the last thing I wrote down was the real hero was the friends we made along the way. Yeah, it was okay. An interesting little thing for Hanasaki. I mean, considering we haven't had much of Hanasaki, I mean, it was pretty interesting and an interesting story. But the villain's plans got a little overcomplicated, but still pretty good. So, Chapter 24 is the Capsule Monster Chess. Basically, we are now technically into the Death T arc. So, Capsule Monsters, or Capmon, if you're annoying. But no, Capsule Monsters, which we have seen in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. I don't technically know like where it falls in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, but there's like a mini arc where like they go back and find Alexander the Great, and then they duel him in Capsule Monsters. Yeah. Anywho, so they explain it. It's just like Duel Monsters, honestly. It's like, okay, you have a certain number of monsters, and then higher levels beat lower levels and stuff. It's just like Duel Monsters. You can basically get it. Let's see. What do we have here? I wrote down no fake gamers. Oh, yeah. So, because Capsule Monsters is more for, like, elementary school students, they kind of, like, gang up on Yugi because he's a high schooler. And it's like, oh, we don't want any fake gamers here. There's going to be a lot of gamer talk, and it's quite frankly hilarious. So, and then we meet Kaiba. Mokuba Kaiba. Yeah, Seto Kaiba's little brother Mokuba. And yeah, he shows up. He is apparently the Capsule Monster Chess Champion. I wrote down he has a posse with guns and tasers. What the fuck? I don't fully remember that part, but I'm sure it's here on screen. He apparently has guns and tasers. So, which, I mean, this is Mokuba Kaiba. If Seto Kaiba is any indication. Oh, goodness gracious. We have a lot of notes on this chapter. I wrote down this dude's hair. Page 8 and 9. Okay, well, now I gotta look it up. I made sure to give a specific page, so I gotta look at this. Oh, I see it. Oh, yeah, this dude's hair. So hopefully I put it on screen. It's technically over. It's the bottom right panel on page 9. This dude's hair. I just wanted to highlight that. Anyway. I wrote down instant darkness, just add Yugi. Oh, yeah, they're, like, picking on him, and there's, like, no transition. They're like, oh, look at that stupid necklace. Let's smash it. And it's just, get your filthy hands off this puzzle, you damn dirty brats. Like, there's just no transition to Dark Yugi, so I thought that was funny. And then, yeah, Mokuba figures out, because apparently Seto told Mokuba about how Yugi basically changed. So the Kaibas are kind of the first ones, other than Shadi, to figure out that there is another Yugi. Yugi pulls off a diagonal super attack, which allows him to win, despite the fact that he had very low monsters. And we get penalty game number 8, which is Capsuled, which is basically the exact same thing he did to Seto Kaiba. He just traps Mokuba and he experiences death, basically. But Mokuba does warn that Death T is coming, Seto's new project, to get his revenge. Also, I think there's like a whole like section about dungeon dice monsters, which is funny. So I just wrote that down. So yeah. Which is also just like Duel Monsters. Chapter 25 is the 1-inch terror. Oh yeah. The first note is, it's probably Kaiba. So Yugi and Jonochi go to an arcade, and they're like, hey, let's try to get the high score. And not only is it the high score on like this one machine, like they're linked up on the internet. So the high score is for all of the country, and the person that has the high score, it's Kai, Kai, and it's like, oh, who's this Kai guy? And it's like, Jonochi, it's probably Kaiba, because he is the king of games, and they basically say that. Also, there's one of the characters is basically just Bruce Lee. Yeah, let's see. Oh no, this guy shows up and he is Bruce Lee. Well, he's not actually Bruce Lee, but he like models himself off of Bruce Lee, and he takes the puzzle, and he steals Yugi's puzzle, and then Jonochi goes after him after getting some canned coffee. And then I wrote down Jonochi's shadow game. But yeah, so Jonochi actually fights this guy, and he says, I've got all my moves from Bruce Lee. This is apparently the Bruce Lee appreciation chapter. But yeah, so they have a thing in this where it's not just a fight. You have to hold a knife between your teeth, and then you have to avoid getting, sliced, basically. Like that. That's going to be the thumbnail right there. So, you have to avoid doing that, and Jonouchi does have his, but he's like, oh, no, you don't need to put a knife in your mouth, because then I'm going to have to hold back, and I ain't holding back on you. And then Jonouchi uses his pocket cola, and then I just wrote down Ora. So, Jojo has infected my life, and I'm just hearing Ora now. So, yeah. Chapter 26 is Russian Roulette. It's only a few minutes after the last chapter, and Vice President Mokuba Kaiba of Kaiba Corp has invited Yugi and Jonouchi to the Kaiba mansion. We get to meet Hobson, which is pretty cool. It's always nice to see him. And they have dinner roulette, where basically there's six dinners on a roulette wheel, and you have to spin and hope you don't get something with poison. So yeah. And Mokuba has a switch, basically, that Mokuba has a switch to control where the poison is. Also, Jonouchi gets poisoned, and then the switch actually breaks, and he's like, how did that happen? And it turns out Yugi actually, tied the Millennium Puzzle onto the thing and thwacked the shit out of it. So yeah. So Mokuba is poisoned, which I wrote down, oh no, anyway. And yeah, he's poisoned. He'll be back. He's okay. He had the antidote, but Jonouchi gets the antidote. And that leads us into Chapter 27, Project Start, with 2 exclamation points. I wrote down almost justified. So this is when we finally get to see Kaiba again. And he basically says, I've been having nightmares ever since that day. Yeah, everything has changed since then. There's a part of me that's like, you know what? This is almost justified. And I have to say almost, because once you get past this section, it is no longer justified what Kaiba's doing. But to be honest, it's okay, he was a jerk and he stole the Blue Eyes White Dragon. He stole that from Grandpa. But at the same time, he has been living hell. He experienced death and has had nightmares about it since then because he stole a card. It's almost justified. I wrote down boys will be boys. Because Kaiba comes down and he's like, oh, did Mokuba try poisoning you? Well, boys will be boys. It's amazing how much that excuse never works for anything anymore, or ever, probably ever, let's be honest. If you ever give the excuse boys will be boys, that is an open, I don't fucking care, So, yeah. We get a little backstory. Gozaburo Kaiba has been dead for 6 months, but apparently he was driven to suicide, and I wrote down, this is a bit more hardcore, and I had to remember, this is, this is the manga we're talking about. It is a lot more hardcore than the anime. But yeah, so we go to Kaiba Land, and there is, let's see, I wrote down virtual Amit. Oh yeah, because there's but he basically has a virtual Amit, which I thought was pretty cool, because it's here's this virtual, monster, but it's Amit. It's the crocodile, from the last arc. So I thought that was just kind of nice. And yeah, so we do get a little dual monsters. We get the Hitatsumi Giant. I don't know why I kind of said that like Kite, actually. Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, which I do have that too. Kaiba has 3 other blue eyes, so this is where we get into the first episode of the anime, where Kaiba basically, there's 4 blue eyes white dragons in existence. Grandpa had 1, and then Kaiba got the other 3, and he was like, oh, yes, the greatest collectors known to man have those cards, so I took them. And he actually said, after I took one of them, the guy drove himself to suicide. Oh, well. It's oh, okay then. This is pretty crazy. But yeah, Grandpa loses the duel, and we have Kaiba's penalty game, No Death by Virtual Reality, which is essentially exactly what he went through, except now it's by virtual reality, and this is where Grandpa has to be taken to the hospital, and Yugi now has to face Death T, which leads us into Chapter 28, Arena number 1. So, Yugi takes his grandpa's deck, and it was at this point that I was like, oh yeah, Yugi had his own deck in the last duel, but he never uses it again. I never really thought about, like, yeah, he never uses his own deck, it's always his grandpa's deck. Granted, Yugi will update his deck throughout the anime, but still, I just thought that was very interesting. So, Arena number 1, we have Climb the Tower for the rematch with Kaiba. Honda's here too. So, yeah, he's here. He was visiting Kaiba Land with his, I think they say his nephew, Joji, who is a very annoying baby. Yeah. I wrote they reused this for Mai. Oh, that's right. So, they also meet up with Anzu, who's there. She's, like, working there, because she apparently lost her job at Burger World. Oh, that's right, because she said, like, I lost my job after I slapped the shit out of a guy for touching my butt. Like, you got fired for that? Or was it that she was fired, or was it that she quit? I don't remember. But we have Death Tea number 1, which is Stardust Shootout. Oh yeah, and so Anzu's wearing a very sexy armor outfit, and I wrote down, they reused this for my Valentine during the Virtual World arc. So, there you go. The first, basically, challenge of Death Tea is Laser Tag, which I wrote down, Saul Goodman approved. They have to face off against Team America, which I swear one of them is the hair guy, my hair. Anyway, it's a bit shorter, though, but it looks like the same design and everything. That leads us into Chapter 29, Shooting Stardust. And I wrote down, let's see, maybe hit the teamwork, like Amajiki? No, they didn't do that. Because they seem to be colliding the bounty hunters that Kaiba hired, which Kaiba hired, like, the best marksman in the universe to face Yugi, So, yeah, I thought maybe they would hit the teamwork, but they didn't end up doing that, but that's alright. I wrote down, Janochi kicked him! Finally, somebody kicked someone! He just straight up kicked him and then shot him and then left, so... the baby is a pervert. That happens. Honda's got the gun. Baby, gun, yeah. So basically, the Americans had real guns, basically, like real laser guns that could kill people. But Anzu also had that, Anzu also had that, so Honda, like, switched it out, got her real gun, and then had Joji swap it out, and then he took them out. So, yeah. Chapter 30 is Don't Make a Sound. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, this doesn't sound familiar. It does sound familiar. But anyway, Don't Make a Sound. This is very similar to the one Shadow game we had in the last arc, in the last video. So, yeah. We have Death Tea number 2, which is the Horror Zone. I wrote down there's 3 different reaction shots where someone's like, oh! 2 of them are from Yugi and 1 is from Janochi. I just thought that was, like, weird paneling, but whatever. And yeah, basically, the challenge, Hobson's challenge, actually, is just shut the hell up, or else you get, hit by the electric chair, literally. But they didn't think about the baby, because why would they think about the baby? But the baby gets out, and then he shits in Hobson's lap, and then Hobson screams, and then I suppose he dies, and then that's just that. Now for the actual challenge, which is Chapter 31, Murderer's Mansion. So, first off, Yugi can feel Grandpa's condition within the cards. I don't know how the hell that works. I mean, I guess it's magic and stuff, but I don't know. It's just kind of weird. So, yeah. Let's see. King of Doors, bitch! And then how is he doing that? What the fuck does any of this mean? I don't know. Oh, he's floating in midair. How is he doing that? Okay, I get you. So Kaiba hires a serial killer. It gets weirder as we go on, Kaiba hires a serial killer who's already, like, murdered, like, 10 people at a summer camp. And, they have a hand guillotine. And Yugi, like, figures out the riddle and then they get out. Yeah. Chapter 22 is Chainsaw Deathmatch, where basically someone is going to be chained to the Chop Man, and it's a fight to the death. And I actually thought it's very similar to Jonathan Joestar versus Tarukas in Phantom Blood, for any of you JoJo fans out there. And so Janochi actually is the one who's chained up, and he has to figure out how to, beat this guy and not, get sucked in and killed and all that stuff. So he and Yugi figure out to use a candle, basically, as a lockpick, and then they chain the Chop Man to the door that's locking Janochi in there. The guy uses his strength and then breaks the door off. And then because there was obviously the candle was lit up the oil, and the Chop Man burns. Pretty interesting. Very interesting sort of challenge. Chapter 33 is Terror Cubed. This is where Kaiba decides to break the Union, where we get Death Tea number 3, The Void, where, first off, they have to wait for a little while. Janochi basically says we live in a society. Let's see. They do have a little heart-to-heart of about stuff, which is nice. And, Yugi's like, oh, if it wasn't for me, you guys wouldn't be here. And Janochi's like, screw that. We're here because we're your friends, man. So, yeah. And then Anzu draws the smiley face on all their hands. It's the symbol, man. It's the symbol. So, yeah. And then I wrote down that one episode of Clone Wars and also Rebels, where basically like there's a bunch of like falling blocks and stuff, and you have to get around them and get to the exit. That was an episode of Clone Wars with Obi-Wan, and that was also an episode of Rebels with Ezra. So yeah. I wrote down Dancing Ultra Instinct. So Anzu figures out that there's a rhythm to the blocks that are falling, and they just have to dance with the rhythm, and then they won't get hit, but then the rhythm changes, so it was kind of weird. But then Honda actually gets trapped. There is a hair that I've been trying to get. I'm sorry. Honda actually gets trapped by one of the blocks. It basically like claps down on his jacket, not on his ass cheeks, but it claps down on his jacket, and he's basically like, well, I'm stuck, guys. You go on. It's like, well, just take your jacket off, man. Anyway, we've lost Honda, so he's out. Chapter 34 is Arena number 2. I wrote down Kaiba is a straight villain. Because he is. He is all about that vengeance and stuff like that. Mokuba is actually Death Tea number 4, but Kaiba doesn't have any faith in Mokuba, which is interesting. And I like how he says, there's no brotherly love in gaming. I thought that was pretty funny. So, there's no brotherly love in gaming. If you think that, you're a loser. It's like, there's so much like gamer talk, and it's kind of funny with like the state of gamers nowadays. Like, he's not like, I don't know, I don't want to say like, oh, he's wrong or he's right, but it's like, he's so intense, and some people are like that, So I just find it funny that he's so intense about gaming, We learned that Yugi has been holding back his dark self because he's kind of afraid of it. He doesn't know what it'll do, But we get Mokuba's challenge, which is just more Capsule Monster chess, but still pretty cool. And then Janochi and Anzu basically say, hey, it doesn't matter. You are you. If you win, go win. Like, you're not going to be any different. No matter who you are, we're still your friends. And then so that gives Yugi the confidence, and he's like, okay, then I'll let him out. And then, I don't know, like, the paneling of this is so cool, where we get Janochi and Anzu. It's like, oh, he's doing it. He's changing into the other Yugi. And then we get, we see the transition into Dark Yugi. And I just had to put in the music. Like, I turned that music on. Oh, that was an epic moment, I have to say. We also have the stakes of this game, guns to heads. Yeah, Janochi and Anzu are being held at gunpoint. Pretty straightforward, actually. Chapter 35, Board Game Deathmatch. Let's see. So, Mokuba has rigged the capsules he got, which didn't work last time, so I'm not sure why he's thinking that'll work again. And there was one point where as I was watching, or as I was reading this, I was like, was this a real game? Like, I don't know. Because like, for some reason, like, the way they talked about it, I don't remember why. So, I wrote down Yugi with that shoddy strat. So he basically passes all of his turns for a little while, until eventually, like, he corners them, or he gets cornered, and then he evades in order to have Mokuba attack his own monsters, which is interesting. And then one of Yugi's monsters self-destructs and gives him the path to the evolution space. And so Yugi now has a level 5 monster, and I wrote down we have a bit of a Mexican standoff here. And then basically what happens is that Yugi's level 5 is destroyed, but Mokuba's level 5 is wounded. Wounded enough for Yugi's like level 2 to go in and finish the job. Or something like that. Maybe he was poisoned. I don't remember. But yeah. So, Yugi wins! Hooray! Let's see. So, that leads us into Chapter 36, Battle Beyond Hope. There's a penalty game for Mokuba. Kaiba says the loser must experience death, and so Mokuba starts to go through that, but Yugi saves him, and Mokuba questions, why? Why did you save me? And essentially, Yugi just says, we dueled, so we're friends. That's actually a Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal reference for any of you out there. Go watch Zexal. It's awesome. Anyway. Also, Grandpa needs surgery. So it's like a lot more serious than in the anime where it's like, oh, he's in a bed, he's got the oxygen on, and it's like, no, they're doing like surgery. Like, Janochi calls Hanasaki and is like, hey, how's the condition? It's like, he's going into surgery. It doesn't look good. And it's like, oh, geez. Anyway, so yeah. And now we get Death Team number 5, the rematch. It's the motherfucking rematch between Yugi and Seto Kaiba. So yeah, once again, Yugi is no longer using his own deck. He's using his grandpa's deck. And essentially, it's the first episode of the anime now. Like, just straight up. This leads us into chapter 37, which is To the Death. So first off, I actually wrote down a couple cards that are featured. And actually, I looked them up to make sure they were all, like, legit. And a lot of them are. Like, Wicked Worm Beast is a legit monster. Interesting effect. Now, they do have a little screwery in here, a little Duelist Kingdom muckery going about, where, like, one of Yugi's monsters, I guess it's the Winged Dragon, he can fly and has the chance to evade an attack and then fire back. That's not a rule. That's not a thing, because the Winged Dragon, I mean, unless... Okay, no. So I just looked up Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress number 1. Since when is that shit number 1? What the fuck is number 2? Oh. Well, either way, they're both normal monsters, so it doesn't matter. So, Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress number 1 is a normal monster, so it doesn't have any sort of effect to fly, so that's some, like, you know, early, like... Takahashi hadn't figured out all the rules and mechanics of the game yet, so yeah. There was also, speaking of muckery, speaking of early Yu-Gi-Oh! Malarkey, so Kaiba ends his turn, but he has no monsters, and so because of that, he's allowed to place one of his monsters from his hand in defense mode, basically. So, like, that's too many cards. Okay. So basically... You know, he does his thing. I don't have any monsters. Well, I'm allowed one free monster in face-down defense mode. That's not a thing. That is so not a thing. Like, can you imagine if that was a thing? It'd be incredible. Do you know how many people would screw with that? I just put down the White Stone of Ancients. You break that, I get a Blue Eyes. Like, are you kidding me? Don't even with that early Yu-Gi-Oh! Malarkey. Anyway. Kaiba also summons Sagi the Dark Clown and powers him up with Dark Energy. Again, another real card. However, a bit of a change here. In the manga, Dark Energy boosts Sagi by like 30%, I think, whereas the real card only boosts him by 300 attack points, which is good. No percentages, please. Percentages are horrible. So, you can really tell I'm getting into the mechanics of the game. I love playing the game, so yeah, I do kind of like getting into some of the mechanics here. Let's see. Yugi realizes that he needs to use spell cards, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, no shit. And I was like, oh, we go in there, guys. We go in there because Yugi draws the left leg of the Forbidden One. We go in there. But we also have Gaia the Fierce Knight, which is, Kaiba claims is the most powerful of the warrior class, which is pretty interesting. But Kaiba does destroy it and says, prepare a place in hell for your master. It's a great Kaiba line. I just had to highlight that. Chapter 38 is the Terror of Blue Eyes. So, Kaiba basically gets out 2 of his blue eyes, and I wrote down direct attack or no, because they keep saying it's like, oh, if you don't have any monsters, then I'll win. But I didn't think that direct attacks were a thing back then, you know? Like, at least I don't know. Like, I don't think direct attacks were a thing in Duelist Kingdom, and this is before Duelist Kingdom, you know? So, I don't know. But let's see. We do have a spell card, not a magic card, but a spell card. I imagine that's an updated translation of it to say spell card. But we get Swords of Revealing Light, which is cool. And Yugi figures out that he needs to solve the puzzle of the Exodia experiment. Which I actually like the way they word this, that, you know, oh, normally one monster is one monster. You know, that's just that. But the creators of the game experimented with using 5 cards to summon one monster. And that's the Exodia experiment. Which I should also, by the way... Should be... Let me just... Chaos Max, Malefic, Blue Eyes, Blue Eyes, Blue Eyes, Azure, Spirit, Neo, Alternative. There we go. Okay. I just wanted to get all those out since we're now officially in the duel. Anywho, so, yes, solve the Exodia experiment. We also have that thing where Swords of Revealing Light only works on the monsters that were already on the field. So Kaiba is able to summon Judgeman and still attack. And then Yugi summons the Dark Magician to attack Judgeman. And again, you know, so Kaiba summons all 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons, but it's just very, like, it's unclear if direct attacks are a thing, because it's like, oh, you will receive, your damage will be up to negative 8,800, you know, and it's like, well, okay, I guess. Anyway, let me get my boys. Let me get all 3 of my Blue Eyes White Dragons. Yeah, those are the ones I have. So, yeah. And, yeah, he has all 3. We get Chapter 39, Endgame. Yu-Gi-Oh! Endgame. I wrote down, never tell me the odds. Because, yeah, the odds are stacked against Yugi that he will be able to complete Exodia. But they are together. And he remembers his friends. He can do anything. Even if they're not right there, they can do anything together. And he brings out the unstoppable Exodia! And he attacks with Rage Inferno Exodia Flame. Because, see, that's wrong. What it actually is...
Draw your last pathetic card so I can end this, Yugi.
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba. But it does contain... the unstoppable Exodia!
Impossible!
I've assembled all 5 special cards, all 5 pieces of the puzzle.
Exodia! It's not possible! No one's ever been able to call him!
Exodia! Obliterate!
You did it! Yugi, you won!
This can't be! My brother never loses!
You play only for power, Kaiba, and that is why you lost. But if you put your heart in the game, there is nothing you can't do.
But how? How could I have lost to him?
Kaiba, if you truly want to know, open your mind! There, Kaiba. Maybe now you will begin to see.
So yes, Exodia, obliterate! And he does with it. And I love how they specify attack infinite. Oh, so that is, I mean, it's basically, if you watch the first episode, you know how the duel progresses, basically. So yeah, Yugi solves and summons Exodia and defeats Kaiba with the most invincible monster in the game. This leads us into the final chapter we're covering today, Chapter 40, A Piece of His Heart. Penalty game number 9, Mind Crush! He literally just says Mind Crush. Like, that's not even a joke, like, for the abridged... Like, no, he legitimately says Mind Crush. So, yeah, Kaiba gets Mind Crushed. Honda just, like, materializes out of nowhere. Like, there's a shot, there's, like, no one, and then he just, like, literally just materializes. And sure enough, he took off his jacket. So, yeah. And then Mokuba comes in to stop the guards from trying to kill them. And then we get a bit of Mokuba and Kaiba's backstory, where they're at the orphanage and stuff. I wrote down Kaiba used to flip-flop. Let me try to get back there. Okay, so Kaiba basically says, Mokuba, don't cry. I'll make a good life for us someday. Listen, if you show weakness, it's over. Don't trust anyone. It's like, okay, that's not exactly the inspirational thing you said, you know? So I just wrote that down. It's like, that's not exactly... I don't know. But then we also see Gozaboro and how Seto beat Gozaboro. Mokuba says that Seto cheated, though? He hasn't explained how he cheated at the chess game. He just apparently did. But that doesn't make sense. The whole point was that he won. He beat Gozaboro, and then he had to adopt them. So, I don't know. I also wrote down, and if you follow me on Twitter, I also tweeted this. If Seto Kaiba was given the greatest education money can buy, why was he at Domino High School? Like, I finally just thought about that, because Mokuba is like, oh, you know, he just crammed him, basically, with all this education. This, everything to make Kaiba the great heir to make Seto the great heir to the Kaiba Corporation. But then it's like, well, wait, if he was doing that, why did he attend Domino High School, like a public high school, you know? Like, it doesn't really, I don't know. And then we have Seto taking over, Kaiba Corp, and he's like, oh, the company's mine. And Gozaboro's like, yes, it is. Now see what happens when you fail. And then he just jumps out a window and dies. You really can't pin that on Seto, like, because we had that guy earlier who was like, oh, well, you drove your father to suicide. It's like, you didn't have to do that. Like, I don't really think that's Seto's fault, you know? I think that's more Gozaboro for being insane. So, yeah. But Yugi also says that Kaiba is currently rebuilding his heart. And he's going to rebuild it piece by piece and hopefully will be rebuilt to be good. He's still going to be a major prick, but a good major prick. A good prick. Isn't that what we all need? Anyway. Grandpa's good. He's recovered now. So apparently the surgery went well, whatever they were operating on. And the last thing I wrote down is 2 souls. Because we also get, after they tell Yugi that his grandpa is okay, Jonochi is like, oh, when did Yugi go back to normal? And he starts to ask him, like, hey, you know, is everything okay? Are you good? And it's like, but he doesn't. He's like, oh, whatever form, either way, it's still Yugi. So yeah, that ends the Death T arc. Very fascinating arc, actually. It's nice to have, you know, Kaiba be a main villain, like an arc villain, because we don't really get that in the anime. We really just get him for the first episode. So I really, really enjoyed him and Mokuba as villains, you know? And it was definitely interesting, you know, because it is a bit of a change of pace from the Shoddy arc, where it's like, okay, that one was, you know, about judgment and stuff, and Shoddy trying to figure out Yugi, and Yugi trying to honestly figure out himself with, you know, the 2 personalities, the 2 different souls. And so then coming into this one where it's straight, okay, it's vengeance and all that stuff with Kaiba, and there's all these, interesting sort of games, and sort of the lengths that Kaiba goes to that are so ridiculous, like, because some of the things like we've had earlier, like with the Scorpion or with the, the singing guy, it's like, they're kind of dumb. This time it's like, no, this is basically an insane man wanting revenge. Like, yeah, Kaiba hired a serial killer. He has the money for that. Yeah, he hired the 3 greatest soldiers in America. He has the money for that. It's ridiculous, So I love it. Excuse me. So yeah, I just really, really love just the lengths Kaiba goes to. And it's honestly interesting, like, because we get some of his perspective as he watches, and it's like, he's sitting there analyzing his opponent, basically, and we get more into like his mindset and stuff about gaming. And then we see how Kaiba is clever, and he attacks different parts of Yugi, like with attacking the Unity and stuff like that, trying to divide them and stuff. So, and then all of that boiling down to the duel from the first episode, which is so cool, and then seeing Exodia, which is so awesome. So yeah, really, really great. And they do slightly make you a bit sympathetic for the Kaiba boys, because Mokuba, it's like, okay, this is a guy who he wants to do right by his brother, but sometimes he just can't. Sometimes he's not good enough, and so he tries to do right by his brother, but it doesn't always work out, and he has to figure that out. And then we have Kaiba, who Kaiba's backstory is always interesting, just because it's because it is basically started from the bottom, now I'm here. It literally is like he just started as an orphan with nothing but just his brother. And the way it's like, not only did he beat Gozaburo in chess to become Seto Kaiba, he was then able to surpass his stepfather and completely take over the Kaiba Corporation. It's just so fascinating. So, and then yeah, I do like that there's a bit more with like, oh well, Kaiba, I destroyed the evil part of his heart, and now he has to rebuild himself, and in time, hopefully he can be more of a brother to you, Mokuba. And I like that, because they really do. Maybe one problem with the anime is that it is all in that first episode, where basically all of Kaiba's story we have had up till now is told in 24 minutes of an anime, where you meet Kaiba, he wants the blue eyes, he duels Grandpa. So we skip from he wants the blue eyes to dueling Grandpa here at the Death Tea arc. Then after Grandpa is sent to the hospital, you skip over all of Death Tea just to get to a duel between Yugi and Kaiba, and that's where we get Exodia and everything. And if anything, you really have to stop and think like, oh yeah, in the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh, Kaiba's the villain. But that's it. After that, we go into Pegasus. So it's just interesting to get a lot more of Kaiba as the villain. How was he as a villain? And how, I like how Yugi talked about it later, like, okay, look, he's rebuilding himself. I shattered his heart, and he needs to rebuild himself. And hopefully, in the future, he will be better, Which we do see. Technically, we do see that a bit more once you get into Duelist Kingdom. He shows up, and he's like, look, all right, Yugi, I respect you, but I have to go face Pegasus my own way in order to save Mokuba. And we do get that. And then after that, he does sort of get a little, he does get a bit more, not really antagonistic, but he is a bit more harsh, I guess, to Yugi. He still always respects Yugi, he just wants to beat him. He becomes more of a classic anime rival at that point. But this, honestly, like, I would almost say that this is better than the first episode, because this just has way more character for the Kaiba boys. So yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed this. As for other stuff we could kind of talk about, I mean, all the games were really interesting. Some of them, like, okay, the whole thing with, the falling blocks, like, that was pretty basic. Again, it was a Clone Wars and a Rebels episode. Excuse me. And then the whole thing with like, oh, don't make a sound. Like, okay, we already did that Shadow game though. Like that sort of stuff is like, okay, well, that's not really great, but it is sort of interesting. The atmosphere though is really interesting. Like I like the art for like the murderer's mansion and stuff like that is really, really cool. And then I did actually like the whole thing with the Chop Man. It's a bit ridiculous as like, oh, Kaiba hired a serial killer. Like, okay, great. But it's really, it's comedically ridiculous. It's a lot of fun, and I did really enjoy it. And then, yeah, like, and then some of the earlier ones, like with, you know, with the Bruce Lee guy and the digital pets and the American hero, like that all was just sort of standard Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh manga stuff. I like actually the emphasis on capsule monsters as well, because, you know, this whole thing is, you know, it's like, okay, Yugi's going through some challenges, but then you know that the final game is a rematch in Duel Monsters with Kaiba. And so you're just waiting, like, okay, so we have all these challenges until we get to the actual game. But I like Mokuba being in there with Capsule Monster Chess. I thought that was really interesting. Again, it is sort of like another version of Duel Monsters. You know, like we joked, like, oh, so it's just like Duel Monsters. And it is very similar, but it's just different enough. And I actually like Mokuba to being involved and actually, like, doing something, you know, because we really don't get much of that in the anime. Like, he has one duel, I think, in Duelist Kingdom where he duels Yugi. But then after that, he really doesn't do anything else. Like, he's just sort of there, like, he's, you know, he's the commissioner in Battle City, but that doesn't really, it doesn't do anything. Mokuba is basically just sort of a background character after that. So I like the inclusion of Mokuba, and I like how much he participates in this. You know, he tries to beat Yugi. And I also found it interesting, you know, the whole thing with the poisoning, because Kaiba, like, calls him out on it, like, yo, you were trying to, you know, ruin everything before we even started. Like, what if Yugi had died to the poisoning? He wouldn't have faced Death T, you know? So that's the thing. Like, it's very interesting. Like, Mokuba took it upon himself to try to kill Yugi immediately, basically. And you almost think, like, he's kind of trying to, you know, one-up Seto, basically. So I like that, just how much Mokuba is basically trying in this one. So yeah, all the art and stuff is really, really great too. Again, I like some of the choices where it's like, here's this virtual monster. It's just a mitt. Like, Kaiba, I don't even think Kaiba met a mitt, you know? He met a mitt, but he made a virtual mitt. So I just thought that was like an interesting little design choice there. But yeah, like, all of it was still pretty solid, and this was just a really, really great arc, and I really, really enjoyed it. I feel like we're really having fun on this run through of the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga. So yeah, that is basically it. Again, really, really great. Next time, join us back in 2 weeks when we look over, I believe it is the Monster World arc of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga. This will be our final Yu-Gi-Oh manga review, at least of the original manga. And this will be covering chapters 41 through 59, the Monster World arc. So yeah, that is basically it. With all that being said, I'm Alex from 7th Hour Films, and I will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of my Yu-Gi-Oh manga reviews and stuff, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure to hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.